I don't think there's ever been a movie that's been less for me than James Cameron's Avatar. I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, what about Cats? And my answer to that is that Cats is for no one, so it doesn't count. And just a disclaimer here, because I know a lot of people love this movie and find most of the complaints about it to be like lame or weak or unjustified, and you're obviously fine to have those opinions. Movies are beautiful and enjoyment of them is largely subjective. So if you love Avatar, this isn't supposed to be a direct attack on you or the things you love, but I also don't feel the need to pull the punches on one of the highest or the highest grossing movie of all time, depending on what metrics you're looking at, that was directed by James Cameron. But I've never liked Avatar. In fact, I've always hated it. I'm not one of those people who loved it in theaters because of the spectacle, but then when I watched it at home, didn't like it as much. I'm not even one of the people who thought it was a particularly good visual spectacle because 3D is bullshit and it gave me a headache. I wasn't even planning to watch this one because of how much I disliked the original Avatar, but while filming the Mothership podcast, our friendly space ninja proposed that I fly out to Montreal to watch the original Avatar, then go see the new one and do a whole new exclusive podcast episode around it, and then I would be able to kind of make my own video for my channel that would be a fun little meme-filled travel Avatar video. So I said, pay for my flights, I'll cover my hotel, and you've got a deal. So then it was time to head to Montreal. Hi, I need to cancel my reservation for tomorrow, please. Thanks. So I got a warning from Air Canada this morning that my flights may be affected due to severe weather patterns. Apparently Montreal is getting 20 to 30 centimeters of snow all Friday into Saturday, and my flight back is supposed to be very early on Saturday. So yeah, I think this whole thing is just dead in the water less than 24 hours before I'm supposed to get there. So yeah, I'm not in Montreal. And before I even canceled the trip, I used my points to book a seat to the earliest showing of Avatar so that if they still went to the studio to talk about it, maybe they could bring me in on a laptop screen and it would be a different type of meme. And then the studio canceled the podcast space because of the impending storm. So now I'm just stuck with this. There was a world where I didn't have to do this, a world where I was off the hook. I could never have engaged with Avatar again, and now I'm trapped and I don't even get the ridiculous travel meme out of it. Do you realize how ridiculous it was to plan to get on a plane to go see the sequel to a movie that you hated 13 years ago? It was gonna be cinema. But it's fine, it's gonna be fun. I'm still gonna go through the first movie and the second one, not in detailed points, but just kind of general thoughts, the things I liked, the things I didn't like, which there are more of, and then I haven't seen the new one yet, but we'll kind of do a similar thing. There will be spoilers, but I'll try to be very clear about when those are kicking in. So as long as you've seen the first Avatar, you're safe for the next good chunk of this video. But first, if you want more access to good movies, you need to check out today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark VPN has thousands of different server locations all around the world that you can quickly connect to securely across all your devices with one account. When you're connected, your internet thinks you're in that location, which means you can take advantage of their region-locked content. Recently, I wanted to rewatch The Prestige, but all of my movies are stored away while I deep clean my apartment, and it didn't seem to be available on any Canadian streaming service. But all I had to do was connect to a Turkish server and boom, a Nolan classic. I'm constantly using Surfshark to access streaming services that aren't available here so I can catch up on all the TV shows and movies that I need before my end of the year lists. So let Surfshark open up your world today. It's super fast, secure, blocks unwanted ads, and if you use code JEDI, you can save a whopping 85% off your subscription, plus get 3 months free. And if that wasn't enough, they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied, so make sure to click the link in the description down below to check out Surfshark for yourself. So last night I rewatched Avatar and subjected someone else to watching it too, just to make sure my thoughts weren't unreasonable, and I still hate it. I know if you're watching this and have listened to everything I've said and have known me over the years, you probably don't believe that I gave this a fair shake, but I really did. A lot of people that I know and respect love this movie. There's a lot of people I saw who said they hated it back in 2009, rewatched it, and really enjoyed it this time around. So I was fully prepared to accept that I was just a young hater, and now I could appreciate the movie for what it is, but no. And even if I remove the stuff that I can acknowledge I was being a little bit overly nitpicky about back in the day, I just don't like it. I don't even like the third act that everyone's like, oh, but this is this perfectly crafted and directed action spectacle. And sure, I guess, for you. I just find the whole thing so goddamn boring. And I'm not really someone who gets bored. So I'm just gonna break down the thoughts I had after watching it the second time, and then we'll dive into part 2. Dialogue and acting. So for all the things that I distinctly remember hating about this movie, while also just not remembering most of the details about it, nothing could have prepared me for how bad most of the dialogue is.
Oh yeah, who's bad? That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, bitch.
People complain about Marvel quips, but most of this movie sounds like people recording voiceover lines for video game characters. Like everything that comes out of the military characters' mouths sounds like the random shit they say at the beginning of Call of Duty matches.
Look at all this fresh meat. Woo!
You're not in Kansas anymore.
I didn't sign up for this shit.
All right, ladies, let's bring the pain.
This is gonna ruin my whole day.
Look out, Hot Rod.
We even get a scene that feels like it's right out of The Happening, except we're not told afterwards that it was supposed to be a B movie.
Probably just talking to a tree right now. But if you're there, I need to give you a heads up.
My name is Elliot Moore. Just going to talk in a very positive manner.
Like, I just don't get it, guys. That's just barely scratching the surface, but yeah, just like really bad dialogue that not even Sigourney Weaver can save, and she's somehow still a highlight. Also, at multiple points, it feels like Sam Worthington just gave up on the American accent, and that Australian one is just flying through. Like, it truly doesn't matter how good of an actor you are. If the dialogue you're being fed is weak, it is very hard to make that work. But I guess let's move into the plot. Just as a quick recap for people that are watching this that don't actually remember, it really is a tale as old as time. Humans wreck Earth, start bopping the galaxy, find Pandora that has a rich source of a highly desirable material known as unobtainium, which was one of the things I clowned on incessantly for years about this movie. And then someone pointed out that the script actually says that this is like a joke term for like whatever the scientific name for it would be, and it's just stuck over the years. But they never expressed that to us in the movie, and I still think that's fucking stupid. So they start mining Pandora while meeting up with the native species, the Na'vi, and trying to like teach them human ways, I guess. They integrate a little bit with the societies by making avatars of the Na'vi and then like kind of mental linking people into those fake bodies. But then I guess humans start getting a little bit too aggressive, so the Na'vi push them out. And of course, when the humans realize that the largest deposit of unobtainium is underneath their sacred tree, literally the place they live, they plan to destroy the whole thing and give the science people 3 months to try and convince them to leave, which is going to be really hard to do considering the Na'vi don't want to talk to people anymore. Now Jake's here because this avatar was made for his twin brother who passed away, so he's the only one with the DNA link able to use it. And he will be paid handsomely for putting his life at risk to try to further the military agenda, meaning that he can afford spinal surgery. He quickly becomes pulled into the Na'vi community because neytiri sees he's pure of heart and they want to learn more about human warriors. And I won't even go at it for being like a rehashed Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas in Space, Fern Gully, because those all exist with similar plots and have similar flaws, but are still largely loved for what they are. So there's no reason why Avatar couldn't just rehash that same kind of tragic tale of colonialism and environmental destruction and elevate it to its own space. I just don't think it did. Now, yeah, I was one of the people back in the day that was like, oh yeah, this is just like all these other movies, but that was more because there was just all of these people constantly saying that this is the most unique movie you'll ever see in your life. It's amazing. So I think it was just kind of like a pushback reaction to that because some people didn't even want to acknowledge that this was a story that had been tread like so many times before, which again is fine. I just don't like how they did it. This military guy is a literal cartoon character in the worst way. I somehow don't hate him as much as I did when I first saw the movie, but I think it's because my brain let me kind of like mentally check out a bit while I was taking notes. And I don't hate him in a way that's like, oh, you hate him because he's doing such a good job playing his character. Like that's an umbrage classification. I feel like he's written so cartoonishly bad that it makes me hate him. At one point he says something about like racial memory.
We will blast a crater in their racial memory so deep that they won't come within 1,000 clicks of this place ever again.
And I realize he's supposed to be a shitty character that does shitty things with shitty beliefs, but like, how did that combination of words even enter someone's mind to have a character say them? It's just very confusing to me. But the big emotional beat of this story is that we, like the outsider, are supposed to be following the outsider Jake around as he becomes a part of this community, as he learns the beauty of their culture, the nuance of their way of life, to respect what they respect, so that we kind of also learn to love those things too. But I think the movie does a piss poor job of making me care about any of them. If Jake Sully had a drawn out death scene like Wolverine and Logan, I would have shed 0 tears, I would not have cared 1 iota, and I would have been checking my watch for when the movie was going to end. And they also kind of do a bad job making me think that Jake genuinely cares about about them. Like, there's a scene where he's showing that he's learned respect for other creatures on Pandora and like only killing for necessity and seeing the sadness in that death. Except he starts the prayer before he puts this animal out of its misery while it's clearly writhing in pain. It just felt so theatrical, like the delivery reminded me of Todd and Scott Pilgrim talking about being a vegan.
I partake not in the meat, nor the breast milk, nor the ovum of any creature with a face.
Like, the whole thing is supposed to be that Jake is pure of heart, that Awa deemed it so, but he's lying to them the entire movie. Yeah, he's genuinely come around to loving their way of life and he thinks it's beautiful, but I'm sure a lot of that has to do with being able to walk again, having a body that can do all the things he used to be able to do, but heightened. I feel like it also lets him escape the reality of a world where he is an undersupported, underfunded, wounded veteran whose twin brother died. And they don't focus on any of that, and I feel like that would have been a massive aspect as to why he wanted to be so ingrained in this culture, but no, it's just played as him purely falling in love with the Na'vi way of life. But yeah, pure of heart, when at one point he's literally manipulating both sides of the equation so he can keep living this exciting life and chasing neytiri while knowing that he has a deadline to make them leave this sacred tree, otherwise they're gonna get bulldozed. He didn't even try to figure out if there might be some middle of the road solution. He just plays it up like, yeah guys, if you let me keep going, I can get in with them real good because they're gonna accept me as one of their own. Obviously, I realize that pure of heart doesn't mean ultimately and always perfect, and that by the end he does the right thing, like, you know, after the tree is blown to bits and a ton of Na'vi die. I'm obviously fine with the character going through an emotional journey and realizing things about himself and the reality of the world, but I don't feel that here. Then it just dissolves into an hour of near nonstop action that a lot of people really dig, but completely loses it for me. I thought it was so uninteresting. Which brings us into emotions. So obviously, if your last hour plus of a movie is just an epic battle between the Na'vi and humans, emotional resonance is important. And that's why this ends up being so weird to me. I don't give a shit about any of these people as individuals. The movie, in my opinion, does a really shit job of that. But when they start dying left and right and neytiri's just giving these horrible guttural grief sounds, it is tragic and it does make me feel bad. Which is obviously the point, and it is doing that job well, but it's not in a way that makes me feel like I'm on a journey with these people or learning anything about myself and my own emotions. It just makes me feel empty. Like, great, I'm watching the destruction of beauty in the natural world. I realize it's almost exactly how I felt watching Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom during the volcano scene, except I actually cared about the dinosaurs. And if you know how I felt about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, you should have a general idea of how The Last Avatar makes me feel. Not good. It makes me feel not good. Like when it's not making me lose my attention or roll my eyes at weird fucking pump-up speeches from the dude that essentially sold them out with like weird savior energy. It just left me feeling empty and bad. But the number of times I started saying, I just fucking hate this in the last hour was astounding. Like there's a quick succession period where a lot of death and destruction is happening, and then Michelle Rodriguez just gets blown up in a blink and you'll miss it moment, and it actually made me laugh. Which is certainly not the emotion that you wanted in that moment. So it was just this very odd combination of just feeling terrible for what I was watching on screen and then laughing at an explosion. But here's where the people might start being like, but Amanda, like the whole thing, it's so beautiful, it's so epic, and that last action scene is so dynamic and well directed and perfectly paced. I don't even think the movie looks that good. The trees, the glowing at night, the floaty things, how everything lights up as they touch and interact with it, all that, amazing. I love it. It's gorgeous. So like, good job, James Cameron and the tech team and artists behind all that amazing work. You did great. But everything else, it's like fine. Honestly, the Na'vi creep me the fuck out, which I realize already makes this like an uphill battle for watching. But when there's too many of them on screen at the same time in the daylight, the shot just looks so fake. And I realize that it is fake, but it's like in a jarring way. In a way where like my eyes aren't really sure what they should be focusing on and certain things look blurry. I don't know. The 3D, in my opinion, was terrible. Once that aspect of the movie completely lost it for me back in 2009, like did it even have a chance for me? But now just to wrap up some other thoughts, I feel like there's like a weird attitude with animal subjugation and like the weird way that they interact with the animals while also it being like how they have like intimate moments and mate with each other. So just to kind of re-explain, they have these long hair braids that have these like follicle things coming out of them. I guess they're called cues. And early on, Grace makes a masturbation joke about Jake's. So instantly we've made it sexual. We also know that the mating requires the Na'vi attaching those cues together. So what the fuck are they doing attaching that shit to animals? I realize that the attaching of the cues is not the actual sexual reproduction act, but it's actually more intimate than that. It's described as creating a long lifetime bond. Like once you do this, that's it, and that it's specifically deeply erotic and spiritual. Like this is literally connecting yourself to someone else and giving them like full control over your pleasure centers. And we're just supposed to know that it's different when they do that with the animals and the plants because they mentally make it so? Does that not also suggest a world where someone can make it not mentally so? And in the pupil dilation they show every time it happens and it just feels weird. I'm sorry. I also just don't like that they do that to the animals. They're all about respect for the natural world, but then they like mentally link with these animals for life and make them just there at their beck and call whenever they need it. And then Jake's attitude specifically when he gets his banshee and he's just like, "You're mine now."
That's right. You're mine.
Like that is a living, independent creature that might be so kind as to provide you a joint bond, but your attitude isn't giving me that. And then he basically just discards him for a while he goes to capture his Hot Wheels dragon. I'm sorry, but I just could not separate this thing from looking like a Hot Wheels. I think it's really funny. The fact that the banshees are literally trying to kill them as you're holding it down and trying to tendril it, questionable.
How will I know if he chooses me?
He will try to kill you.
Like in terms of the connection, I both get it, realize that I'm nitpicking and probably like looking for reasons to feel weirded out by something, that it's like to show their full connection to the environment they share and how entwined they are with it. But I don't like it. And very specifically, I don't like how Jake is interacting with it. So I guess that's pretty much it. I guess fundamentally, I just don't really like what this story's doing. I really don't like Jake. I thought he was interesting at first, but then they don't explore any of the areas that I thought were going to be the most interesting, and they had 2 hours and 40 minutes to do it. I just feel like he's this tourist interloper willing to live out this fantasy for his own benefit, all while knowing the destruction of their way of life is on the brink. If this movie had been him turning on the military and finding a way to sabotage them before they had a chance to wreck as much as they do, I'd probably like it a lot more. Like make it more a little bit of a heist saboteur thing, but then it would be an entirely different movie. And yeah, if you love the last act action spectacle, I am stoked for you. I appreciate it for what it is and acknowledge the amount of work that went into that, but it is just not for me. I genuinely, honestly tried this time, but this movie just comes together as something that I feel is somehow both void of emotional resonance, yet also makes me feel so bad at times for what I have to watch. So I just really don't like the end of it to the point that I completely lose interest, and then so much of the beginning of it makes me laugh and just like question certain choices. I also find it astounding that this movie hasn't really had any cultural reverberation. Like we've got like Pandora at Disney, which I'm sure is great because it's probably all those visual, beautiful, cool things. I don't think it changed the landscape of movies. I don't think it's affected culture. It's definitely given theaters a boost, which is nice. But ultimately that lack of a cultural resonance is what's so weird for how much movie it made. But to me, it just backs my sentiment that it's like very void of substance in other areas. And trust me, I've listened to so many reasons for why people love it and think it's awesome, and that's great, and I can totally see why it works so well for some people. It's just not for me. Also, can't believe that it stole the finale of Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1 2 years before it even released. But now it's time to head to the theater for Avatar 2. Okay, so it's been about a day. I had to very quickly vacate the province to beat another storm. Winter is really trying to harsh the Avatar vibes, but it wasn't terrible. I wouldn't call it good for me, but I definitely didn't walk out in a fit of rage like I did with the first one. I assume it's because I went in with the expectations of knowing that I hated Avatar. It's like how I mostly found Jurassic World Dominion funny because of how much I despise Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I feel like Way of Water still has a lot of the same issues that I personally had with the first one, so if you don't like the original Avatar, I don't see you liking this one because it is a lot of the same. And while the logistic parts of the plot feel a lot less sensible in areas, it still ends up being more enjoyable. enjoyable. I also feel like Cameron did a better job making certain characters likable, but now there's like so many characters that I'm supposed to care about that it was still a struggle to do so. And I wasn't even really bored while watching it. Like, yeah, there are some moments that are just definitely overdrawn out, and I am seeing a lot of people saying that they thought it was super slow and boring, but obviously there is just as many people that were happy to be immersed for this runtime, so your mileage may vary. I will say that James Cameron got a lot better at emotional manipulation because he like brute forced a tragedy until I had an emotional reaction, which we will get to. You're still safe from spoilers right now. The 3D was definitely less headache inducing than the first one, but it was still really distracting at times, like especially when they're still in the forest area. Like the number of times I had to like recoil my head back because something blurry dominated my field of vision, so I couldn't actually focus on the thing that was supposed to be in focus, was just far too much for a movie of this caliber. The HFR, or high frame rate, is also super distracting and made a lot of scenes look really bad because they were just constantly changing them. In terms of dialogue, I feel like that did get a lot better in areas. We still have some like random video game-esque delivery lines, but it is not as glaring. But I still don't really feel for any of these characters. Like there's this whale-style character that I would kill every single Sully family member to protect. And even though Jake's dialogue is a lot better in this one, I still just hate him as a character, and then I feel like they really sidelined Neytiri in this. Then kind of gave her a quality that, while does make sense, I was still not a fan of. But I'm seeing a lot of people talking up Jake this time, and I just don't get it. And it's not Worthington's fault, I just feel like Jake is actually a really bad character. I also hate that they literally made him the leader of this Na'vi clan. It's bad enough that this dude just walks in, betrays all the people who trusted him for his own desires, takes over their rallying as if their pain is his pain, and then he literally gets to be their entire leader when he's been a part of their society for 3 months. Foolish! I do feel like the final action sequences are way more interesting than the first Avatar, and the water is absolutely gorgeous. But I'm already a huge fan of water and the ocean, so like the second I saw the sea village, I was like, hell fucking yeah, this is where I live on Pandora, let's go! But that doesn't change the fact that so much of this plot still feels so messy. Then there's just half-baked ideas tossed in because you know he wants to make them like a major focal point of future installments, but it just feels like they were like tossed in there like frisbees. So yeah, if you're not already a fan of the world that James Cameron built in the first Avatar, there's really no reason to see this, but if you are, I can't imagine you not enjoying this. But before diving into my spoiler thoughts, here's just kind of a light rundown of what the story even is, and this is all the stuff that you'll get from like the opening narration of the movie and the general trailers. 13 years after the events of the original movie, the humans have returned. But this time, it's not for the unobtainium that they've apparently completely abandoned, it's to take up permanent residence on the planet. They can't breathe the air, but otherwise it's just a perfect location for humans after decimating Earth's beauty. And of course, fuck cohabitation and like learning the way of the people that are already there. They want to push the Na'vi out of their homes, so Jake leads what the humans essentially see as a rebel group, except, you know, they're just defending their homes. They bust up their trade routes, steal weapons, just do a lot to close them off from expanding. So the military wants to kill Jake, which makes sense. So venturing into light spoilers, warning, light spoilers, their method of having him hunted down is an interesting one. Before the final battle of the first movie, they downloaded Quaritch and his team's memories and personalities into a chip, sent that back to Earth to be implanted into the avatars they were making for them. So our villain here is the same villain as the first movie, except now he's in the body of the people he wanted nothing more than to decimate. I don't entirely know why they thought this was the best course of action. Like, I guess this way you have trained soldiers that don't need to tap back into their human bodies and blend into the planet better. But it manages to take a villain that I've spent the last 13 years hating with just every fiber of my being and making him way more compelling and interesting on a few different levels. And we get to start the movie off with someone who's already pissed at the person they're trying to kill for betraying the human race, in his opinion, and who Jake and Neytiri have equal stakes in wanting to kill. So as dumb as I think the setup for it was, it makes for great conflict. Because the plan itself gets messy too. They want to kill Jake, so they're both taking out the leader of this group of the Na'vi and who they see as the insurgency leader with all this like intimate human knowledge. But things go in a weird direction that I both do and don't understand. Quaritch catches Jake's kids pretty early on in the forest to create a hostage situation, and they narrowly manage to get them all back except one. So on top of their 3 biological kids, they have the literal Immaculate Conception Na'vi. After Grace died, her avatar got pregnant, and Kiri here is super connected to the whole planet and all its creatures, which themselves are all interconnected. So it seems pretty clear that she's the the literal child of Awa's energy from when they tried to save Grace. She sounds pretty cool, but they still have Sigourney Weaver voicing her, so it really sounds like the voice of a much older woman in a teenager, and it's slightly jarring. And the last kid they have bobbing around is one that Jake describes as a stray house cat. And he is Quaritch's son, Miles, who was apparently just a baby in the first movie that we were never told about. So he's spent his whole life essentially raised by Na'vi, integrating into their culture, and now goes by Spider, and he's the only one that Quaritch manages to capture. So they're using him as the official guide to Pandora while they're trying to find Jake, but also because he feels a connection to his son. Spider doesn't really want to be helping them, but he figures that the more he kind of bops around with them, the better chance he has to escape. And it's a very interesting dynamic to have somebody who hated this entire species of beings now essentially being one of them, but still having all the customs and feelings of being a human, while his son is a human but has spent his whole life with the customs and feelings of the Na'vi. So then your capture results in Jake leaving the clan, just completely abandoning his leader duties and putting some kid barely old enough to take it on. And I get that he has his own kids to protect and that Quaritch specifically has the added revenge incentive, but don't the humans need to take out like this entire group of Na'vi? To me, it just seemed like once Jake was gone, the humans would just continue their plan, so the Na'vi would still attack them, except now they don't have Jake's human military knowledge. If they just turned this into a straight up rogue revenge plot, I would have been way more on board, but he has the full military and company backing the entire time. And because Jake knows the Quaritch is just gonna hunt him down endlessly, he's putting any new clan he associates with at risk too, so not really keeping his family any more safe. So that's the setup and some of my issues with it, but now we're gonna dive into specifics that I liked and what I didn't like, so warning, full spoiler territory, and like not as much context as I would normally give because I don't want to make an hour-long Avatar video. So I don't really know if I like that this just turned into another outsiders learning the way of a different group for a large chunk of the movie. It just felt like a massive retread. I think it's interesting that Jake's kids are seen as demon half-breeds, like the Avatars have 4 fingers to articulate with the human brain physiology, while Na'vi have 3. One of Jake's biological kids ended up with 4 fingers, and Kiri also has 4 fingers, which immediately makes them seem weird to every other Na'vi. But that kind of leads to an issue that I have with Neytiri. She hates Spider. Literally calls him a demon that isn't like them, but ma'am, your husband is human. Like, yeah, he's fully in that body now, but his brain and entire formative development and the way it all functions is all human. Kindly get over yourself. And maybe that's gonna be a focus going forward. I don't know. I get why she hates humans, but there's a difference. So this next one's a very big spoiler, so just as a warning, but at first, I really did not give a shit that Jake's son Neteyam died. I know it created this added drama of like the perfect son dying and the screw up feeling responsible, even though this could have been avoided if Jake had done so many things differently. But then you get the added beauty of Jake finally seeing Loak for who he is and accepting him. But it's almost like Cameron knew that just the straight up death wasn't gonna drive things home, so he shows us a living memory of Jake connecting to Neteyam through Awa and just being so happy to see him. Fuck you, that got me. And I don't even care about either of the people on screen right now. I was still focusing on like, you know what? That fish looks awfully in pain for people who are supposed to respect all of Pandora's creatures. I don't know if I can find a clip of that, but they went like fishing together, so the fish was like... But this leads into that moment at the end in the final showdown when Quaritch has one of Jake's kids after already killing Neteyam, and Neytiri is now threatening to kill Spider. And I think she really would have done it if Quaritch had maintained that he didn't care. Obviously it doesn't happen, and then Spider just ends up back with them at the end of the movie, and then Jake makes this mental comment of like, son for a son. You killed my son, I take your son. But sir, this kid was already always around. He literally grew up with your kids. Your kids love him. Like, what the fuck do you mean? This should have already been someone you saw as like a pseudo-son. Obviously that's gonna lead to some drama in future installments, like is Spider gonna start getting bitter towards this? Spider saved Quaritch from drowning at the last second, so we're gonna get more of him down the line, so there's a lot of different directions that can go. Neytiri's killing rampage on the boat was super cool though. I hated that they made us watch an entire poaching scene. Like, yeah, we get it, humans are destructive assholes who destroy beauty and sentience for personal gain, which leads us to the new unobtainium. This Tolkien, aka giant whale brain fluid, apparently stops aging in a single drop. So single tubes of this stuff is going for apparently like $85 million, which honestly seems kind of low unless this is like a different kind of new modern dollar or whatever. And then there's like just lots of weird logistics there in terms of like what's still going on Earth and how far they've come with like cloning technology. But I really hated watching that entire section. Watching Quaritch just decimate his way through these different Na'vi communities and Jake essentially just letting it happen all felt like very weird. Acknowledging that what's happening with the Tulkun is a trap and then still essentially falling into it because again his kids get captured. But during the final battle, at one point the entire Sea Clan is just gone for no reason. They don't even have their daughter back, but they just suddenly exit the battlefield so it can shift to the sinking ship fight. There had to be a better reason to get them out of the way to make the final fight more intimate. But I won't complain too much because most of this was still really interesting to watch. I loved seeing the outcast Tulkun just fuck up this boat and rip the poacher's arm off. It felt super satisfying after the poaching scene, which I still felt was just like way too much. Again, would kill for outcast Tulkun. And the reason he was outcast, it was just stupid as shit, and he was right. When you're being systematically hunted down like that and seeing destruction in front of your face, you need to fight back when it comes knocking. Like, the Tulkun could just lay out these hunting ships. They just let themselves get picked off, and like, pacifism is great to a point. Then the stuff with Kiri. I get that it was just a big setup, and at first I liked seeing her wonderment of things around her, but like when it hit the point when everyone is basically just dying and drowning under a sinking ship and she's just sitting there smiling at the twinkling fairy fish things, and then at the very last second goes in to help people, it just felt very weird. Good for you, Queen. But I am interested to see what they do with her going forward. But I think those are most of my thoughts. Like, at the end of the day, I just don't think these are necessarily movies for me, and that's okay. By the end, Jake and his family are officially welcome into that Sea Clan, and they're vowing to continue fighting off the invaders. I still think that so much of this plot was messy, and I think a lot of it was just like a secondary thought to get characters where Cameron wanted them, no matter the logistics. I can certainly see that it's the most expensive movie at all time, but that doesn't mean it made me feel half as much of what other movies did this year. Nothing in this movie even cracks the top 10 for making me feel emotions this year, like whether that be like the top 10 emotions of grief or joy or inspiration or meaning. But it got a hell of a lot closer than Avatar 1. But obviously, if you're direct comparing this to other major VFX blockbusters, clearly more care was put into the spectacle of this movie. But they also had a boatload more money and 13 years to get things where Cameron wanted them. I'm personally still more blown away by the little things they did in Everything Everywhere All at Once to make a big impact versus this. But I will say that more care seemed to go into this story than something like Thor: Love and Thunder. Oh my god, what a disappointment. Obviously, because of the water, this was getting compared to Wakanda Forever a lot, and yeah, in like those areas it looks a lot better, but I don't think that this is leaps and bounds better, and I'd rather watch Wakanda Forever any day of the week, even if it is a bit messy. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Can you not wait to see it again? Were you like me and hate the original Avatar and actually see this one as an improvement? Did you love Avatar but hate this one? I'm actually interested in those people. Beyond that, I hope you all have great holidays, no matter where you are, what you're doing, or who you with, even if it's with the comfort of your own company. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.